The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is noted that at the end of his life, that he stood in recognition of his son, Wallace, Deen Mohammed, that he stood in recognition of his son. And how is this reported to us? How do we know about this? There's a gathering at the residence of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad where someone, and I can name the person because I know the name of the person because Imam Deen Mohammed, he told me the name of the person. And I had met the person. I had a conversation with the person. Brought a recording to that discussion, which was the habit of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to have his officials, the top officials and visiting ministers come and visit with him on a regular basis in the National House or offices of the Nation of Islam at that time. And on this occasion, it was reported to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that his son Wallace had been saying things that were contradictory, as it was perceived by the person who brought the charges, contradictory to the teachings of the Nation of Islam. And so, as Imam Deen Mohammed described it, this was not unusual, that this was something that was done on a regular basis in this time, bringing charges and criticism and charges against him for differing with the teaching of the Nation of Islam. So on this occasion, they had a recording, which maybe at other times it was just gossip. You know, they didn't have any physical evidence to point to. Someone heard someone, you know, but this is a recording. So here, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad requests that the recording be played. So they play it. And they said, the persons present said that Honorable Elijah Muhammad became animated and actually stood up and said that my son has got it. And said to his wife, who was still living at the time, Sister Clara Muhammad, is this not what we wanted? Is this not what we wanted or prayed for? What was it? What was it that his son got? Now, we got to look at this carefully. This is our history as a community. This is very important, very serious, because it represents a movement in a direction. And Honorable Elijah Muhammad obviously saw something that he himself could not get. He saw something that was not within his ability to grasp, but it was something that was necessary. He sensed it. There was something necessary as a step of progress that was hinted to him by his teacher and would represent a movement of departure from his teacher to something that would be acceptable in the universal soul of man. He sensed that this is the direction that the Nation of Islam had to go, but he had no knowledge or language to get there. But when it was brought to his attention, or when he became confronted with it, he would recognize it. It would satisfy something in his soul and cause him to stand in his own soul on another level of standing. See, there are ascending levels of standing, and you have to stand in each one. You have to stand in recognition of each one. It has to be a recognition in your own self on each level. And perhaps the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had reached the highest level that the Nation of Islam, in his perception of his teaching, could bring him to. But he knew, he sensed that there's something more. I don't have the ability to get to it. But when he heard it, he said, my son got it. My son got it. So now here is public recognition of the liberation of the members of the Nation of Islam by its leader to step from its confines of local truth for the African American people to universal human recognitions. And what was this tape that they played? It was Imam Deen Mohammed's interview discussing the burden of mythological gods on the life of man in society. So it was a discussion on this verse from the Quran, that man, your community in the context of faith is one community, and your Lord is one. Therefore, worship only him. Put down myth, put down race, put down your local limited truth, put down the claim of others on your dignity. Set it aside and embrace your human worth before God as your creator with a mind and a spirit and a disposition for progress with recognition of what his plan is for you that you share with all mankind. And embrace it in your own reality. But don't embrace it selfishly. Embrace it with the spirit to share everything that you experience and learn for the life of man's progress. And Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't have language for that. He had recognition in his soul for that. And he knew that the Nation of Islam teaching could bring him to that. But he couldn't pass over into the next. But he could point to it when he recognized it. That is no different from the movement that took place in the spirit of Moses following. Recognizing that there is a limit to pointing at a people who are oppressing you. There's a limit to that. At some point, you have to turn away from that as reasoning for not progressing. That at some point, you have to stand in your own recognition of your own value, in your human self, and embrace that struggle. And that frees you. And that makes you the vessel that bears witness to God's oneness and your association with, or your relationship with, that God, that he has freed you from all would-be schemes to oppress you that are most readily identifiable in raising local gods. We are all situated by birth to free ourselves from schemes of oppression. If we embrace this reality, that there's nothing to be worshiped except the one Lord that created everything, and that the elite of that creation is human life. And human life in its recognition of its own sacred purpose. Human life in its recognition of the creator of it and its sacred purpose is a universal truth that defeats all falsehood. And it brings you from regional interests, local interests, national interests, to the universality of the value of human purpose and determination. And that is the manifesto of Islamic life in society. And that is what Imam W.D. Muhammad had. And that is what he gave us.